A perfect one-liner, a hilarious pratfall, a smile that could light up a whole studio audience. Sitcom actors are masters of making life look easy and fun. But for some, the pressure to always be on created a dark shadow they couldn't escape. These are the 13 sitcom actors who drugged themselves to death. 1. Matthew Perry. For a decade, he was Chandler Bing, the king of sarcasm and the hilariously awkward heart of Friends. Matthew Perry's comedic timing was legendary. Whether he was stuck in an ATM vestibule with a supermodel or trapped in a box to prove his loyalty to Joey, his character was the one everyone felt they could relate to. He was the funny one, the slightly neurotic one, the one you knew would always have a joke to diffuse a tense situation. Friends was more than a show. It was a global phenomenon, and Perry, along with his 5 co-stars, became one of the most famous and well-paid actors in the world. On the surface, he had everything: fame, wealth, and the adoration of millions. But behind the scenes, a terrifying story was unfolding. Perry's struggle with addiction wasn't just a small problem. It was an all-out war that consumed his life for decades. He later revealed in his memoir, Friends, Lovers, and The Big Terrible Thing, that his addiction to alcohol and opioids was so severe that he barely remembers filming 3 whole seasons of the show. He was in and out of rehab 15 times, spent millions of dollars trying to get sober, and had numerous near-death experiences, including a burst colon from a struggle with powerful pain medication that gave him a 2% chance to live. He desperately wanted to be free of his addiction, not just for himself, but to help others. In a heartbreaking twist, after years of championing sobriety and being brutally honest about his journey, Perry was found unresponsive in his hot tub in October 2023 at the age of 54. The official cause of death was the acute effects of a powerful anesthetic he was using as part of his therapy, but had taken in a non-supervised manner. His death sent a shockwave around the world, a devastating final chapter for the man who was America's friend, but who ultimately lost his battle with the big terrible thing he fought so bravely for so long. Perry's quiet, lonely death was a modern tragedy, but the dangerous link between comedy and substance misuse is a story that has played out in Hollywood for decades. In fact, long before Chandler Bing, another comedy genius on a legendary Saturday night show, wrote the playbook for superstardom and self-destruction, a tragic pattern that would later be copied by his biggest fan. 2. John Belushi. If you were watching television in the late 1970s, John Belushi was a force of nature. As one of the original, not ready for primetime players on Saturday Night Live, he redefined comedy. He wasn't just telling jokes, he was a punk rock explosion of pure, chaotic energy. Whether he was a sword-wielding samurai, one of the Blues Brothers, or a cheeseburger-screaming lunch counter guy, Belushi's comedy was physical, loud, and brilliantly unhinged. He was the frat boy of Animal House and the soulful musician of the Blues Brothers. He wasn't just a star, he was a cultural icon who embodied a rebellious, anti-establishment spirit that audiences adored. The very energy that made him a superstar was also his undoing. Belushi's appetite for life was matched only by his appetite for illicit substances. For him, substance use wasn't just for parties. It became a daily necessity to keep his high-octane persona going. His friends and colleagues, including Dan Aykroyd, repeatedly tried to intervene, but Belushi saw his substance use as part of his image, the wild man who lived on the edge. He was a high-functioning addict for years, churning out classic sketches and hit movies, but the constant use was taking a severe toll on his health and his work. He became unreliable, paranoid, and increasingly isolated. The end came on March 5, 1982, in a secluded bungalow at the Chateau Marmont Hotel in Hollywood. At just 33 years old, Belushi passed away from an accidental overdose involving a lethal combination of substances. The man who had lived his life at full throttle had finally crashed. His death was a massive wake-up call for Hollywood's party scene, a shocking reminder that even the biggest stars weren't invincible. It was the tragic end of a comedic genius who burned brighter than almost anyone, and burned out way too fast. Belushi's legacy is immense, but part of that legacy is a cautionary tale that would be tragically and eerily echoed by another SNL star more than a decade later, man who idolized Belushi and, in a horrifying twist of fate, would follow in his footsteps almost exactly. 3. Chris Farley. If John Belushi was the punk rock of comedy, Chris Farley was the headbanging heavy metal. Joining the cast of Saturday Night Live in 1990, Farley wasn't just influenced by Belushi. He was his spiritual successor. His comedy was a masterclass in fearless physical commitment. He would sweat, scream, and throw his large body around with a shocking combination of violence and grace. He was the motivational speaker Matt Foley, who lived in a van down by the river, a Chippendales dancer competing against a chiseled Patrick Swayze, and the lovable oafish brother in the movie Tommy Boy. Farley had a rare gift. He could be incredibly loud and over the top, but there was a sweet, vulnerable, almost childlike quality to him that made audiences fall in love. Just like his idol, Farley's off-screen life was defined by extreme behavior. He was known for his epic binges on food, alcohol, and, most destructively, other dangerous substances. His friends, including SNL castmates like Adam Sandler and David Spade, were terrified for him. He was sent to rehab 17 times, often at the insistence of his managers and worried family. But the cycle was always the same. He would get clean, feel the pressure of his fame, and relapse, often more intensely than before. He was desperate to be loved, and he worried that if he got sober and lost weight, he wouldn't be funny anymore. His fat, funny guy persona was both his meal ticket and his death sentence. The parallels to Belushi's death are downright chilling. On December 18, 1997, after a period of intense substance use, Chris Farley was discovered to have passed away in his apartment by his brother. The cause of death was an accidental overdose from a lethal combination of substances, similar to his hero. He was also 33 years old, the exact same age as Belushi when he passed. It was a tragedy foretold, a devastating final act for a man whose desperate need for laughs and acceptance led him down a similar path of self-destruction as the man he admired most. Farley's story is a particularly dark one, a case of history repeating itself in the most heartbreaking way. But long before SNL was even on the air, another young comedy prodigy became a primetime sensation, only to find that the spotlight he craved was also the thing that would burn him out. 4. Freddie Prinze. In the mid-1970s, a young, handsome, and electrifyingly talented comedian named Freddie Prinze took television by storm. At just 20 years old, he landed the starring role in the NBC sitcom Chico and the Man. He played Chico, a charming and optimistic young Chicano man who goes to work in the run-down garage of a grumpy old man, Ed Brown, played by Jack Albertson. Prinze was a phenomenon. His catchphrase, "Looking good," became a national sensation. The show was a massive hit, and Prinze became one of the biggest stars in the country virtually overnight. He was funny, charismatic, and a trailblazer for Latino actors on television. But the sudden, massive fame was a heavy burden for someone so young. Prinze had a history of depression, which was dangerously amplified by the pressures of stardom and his growing reliance on controlled substances. He developed a serious addiction to powerful sedatives and other substances. His behavior became erratic and unpredictable. He would talk openly about ending his life, and his actions deeply worried his friends and family, who felt powerless to stop his downward spiral. He was a young man with a wife, a baby son, Freddie Prinze Jr., who would become a famous actor himself, and a hit TV show, but inside he was in immense pain. The tragedy reached its peak on the night of January 28, 1977. In a hotel room, in front of his business manager, a distraught Prinz made calls to his estranged wife and his parents to say goodbye before committing a fatal act of self-harm. He was rushed to the hospital but passed away 33 hours later. He was only 22 years old. While his death was the result of self-harm, it was clearly fueled by his long-term substance misuse and the deep depression it exacerbated. His death certificate was later amended by a court to reflect that it was a medication-induced accident, acknowledging the immense role his addiction played in the tragedy. Prinz's story was a shocking wake-up call about the dangers of too much, too soon. His death left a huge void in the comedy world. But he wasn't the only young star from a hit 70s sitcom to meet a tragic end. Just a few years later, a young girl from a wholesome family show would die from an overdose. A quiet end that was just as heartbreaking. 5. Anissa Jones. For 5 seasons, from 1966 to 1971, Anissa Jones was one of the most recognizable child actors on television. She played the adorable, pigtail-wearing Buffy Patterson-Davis on the hit sitcom Family Affair. The show was about a wealthy bachelor raising his orphan nieces and nephew in a fancy Manhattan apartment, and Buffy, with her trademark glasses and her beloved doll Mrs. Beasley, was the heart of the show. She was America's sweet, innocent little girl, a symbol of wholesome family entertainment that was beloved by millions. The problem was, Anissa Jones hated being Buffy. She was a normal kid who wanted to grow up, but she was typecast and stuck in a role that kept her an eternal 6-year-old in the public's imagination. When Family Affair ended when she was 13, she found it impossible to get other acting jobs. Directors only saw her as Buffy, desperate to shed her clean-cut image. She fell in with a bad crowd and started acting out. She shoplifted, ran away from home, and began experimenting heavily with substances. She was a classic case of a child star struggling to find a normal life after their fame had faded. After receiving her trust fund from her Family Affair earnings on her 18th birthday, her substance use spiraled completely out of control. Her life became a series of parties and aimless days. On August 28, 1976, just a few months after her 18th birthday, Anissa went to a party at a friend's house in Oceanside, California, and never woke up. The coroner's report found she had passed away from a massive accidental overdose from a toxic combination of multiple substances. The official report called it one of the most severe overdoses the pathologist had ever seen. The little girl who played Buffy was gone, a tragic victim of the dark side of child stardom. Jones's death was a grim warning about the perils facing young actors. Sadly, she wasn't the only child star from that era whose life would take a dark turn. Just a few years later, the young actress from another massive hit, Different Strokes, would face a similar and very public fall from grace. 6. Dana Plato. As the bubbly and kind Kimberly Drummond on the massively popular sitcom Different Strokes, Dana Plato was the picture-perfect girl next door. From 1978 to 1986, she, along with co-stars Gary Coleman and Todd Bridges, was part of one of TV's most famous families. As the older sister to adopted brothers Arnold and Willis, Kimberly was the stable, loving presence in the Drummond household. The show tackled serious issues with a blend of humor and heart, and Plato became a teen idol, her face gracing the covers of countless magazines. But Plato's real life was far from the wholesome image she projected on screen. She admitted to drinking and using substances as early as 14 years old. Her struggles with addiction, combined with a desire to break away from her squeaky clean image, led to her being written off the show after she became pregnant. From there, her life began a long, painful, and very public downward spiral. She posed for Playboy, took roles in softcore porn films, and struggled to find any meaningful acting work. Her post-sitcom life became a sad caricature of a fallen star. The most infamous moment came in 1991 when a broke and desperate Plato robbed a video store in Las Vegas with a pellet gun, making off with less than $200. The security camera footage of one of America's former sweethearts committing a robbery was a shocking low point. She was arrested, served probation, and her struggles continued. She became a fixture on talk shows, often discussing her tragic life story and her battles with addiction. In a final, desperate attempt to revive her career, she appeared on The Howard Stern Show just one day before her death, where callers aggressively questioned her sobriety and life choices. The next day, on May 8, 1999, while visiting her fiancé's family in Oklahoma, Dana Plato passed away in her motorhome. The cause of death was an overdose of prescription medications. Her death was later ruled to be an act of self-harm. At just 34 years old, the actress who had once been the all-American big sister was gone, a final, tragic victim of the curse that seemed to plague the young cast of Different Strokes. Plato's story is one of a desperate search for identity after childhood fame. But she wasn't the only actress from a beloved sitcom to have her life derailed by addiction. A talented actor on a very different kind of family sitcom, Roseanne, would also lose his battle with demons, though his end would be much quieter and lonelier. 7. Glenn Quinn. To fans of the 90s, Glenn Quinn was instantly recognizable for his roguish charm and distinct Irish accent. He first gained fame playing Mark Healy, Becky Connor's tough but lovable boyfriend, and later husband, on the groundbreaking sitcom Roseanne. Though he wasn't one of the main Connors, he was a crucial part of the show's fabric for 7 seasons. He was the bad boy with a good heart, and audiences loved him. After Roseanne, he landed another prominent role as the half-demon Alan Francis Doyle on the Buffy the Vampire Slayer spin-off, Angel. For a while, it seemed like Quinn had successfully navigated the transition from sitcom sidekick to genre show lead. But behind his charming smile, Quinn was struggling significantly. He had been battling a severe addiction to substances, primarily heroin, for years. His substance misuse reportedly began to affect his work on the set of Angel, and his character was eliminated after just 9 episodes. After leaving the show, his life and career went into a steep decline. He lost his home and was reportedly sleeping on friends' couches. Friends and family, including his Roseanne co-star Michael Fishman, tried to help him get clean, but Quinn was unable to overcome his addiction. The end of his story is particularly bleak. On December 3, 2002, Glenn Quinn was found to have passed away on a friend's couch in North Hollywood, California. The cause of death was an accidental overdose. The promising actor, who had been a familiar face in American living rooms for years, had a quiet, lonely passing, far from the spotlight he once commanded. His death was a shock to fans who remembered him as the handsome, funny Mark from Roseanne. Another talent, lost far too soon to the grip of addiction. Quinn's struggle was largely private until his tragic end. The same could not be said for another sitcom actor from that era, a man on Murphy Brown whose battles with substances were an open secret long before he met a similarly tragic fate in his own home. 8. Robert Pastorelli. For 7 seasons on the hit show Murphy Brown, Robert Pastorelli was Eldon Bernecki, the eccentric house painter with a philosophical soul. As Murphy Brown's live-in painter and unlikely nanny to her baby, Eldon was a fan favorite. He was a quirky, lovable character who would offer profound, often bizarre, wisdom while touching up the walls of Murphy's townhouse. Pastorelli's performance was so endearing that it turned what could have been a minor, recurring role into a central part of the show's heart. He was the gentle, artistic counterpoint to the high-strung world of broadcast news. Pastorelli's personal life, however, was far more turbulent than his gentle on-screen persona suggested. He had a long and serious history with heroin addiction. a battle he fought for much of his adult life. In 1999, his life was struck by a public tragedy when his girlfriend, Chera Monjanovich, was found dead in their Hollywood home from a gunshot wound. The death was initially ruled a lethal self-harm, but the case remained clouded in suspicion. As the investigation into her death was being reopened years later, Pastorelli was named as a person of interest. He always maintained his innocence, but the pressure and scrutiny were immense. On March 8, 2004, with the investigation into his girlfriend's death still active, Robert Pastorelli was found to have passed away in his home in the Hollywood Hills. He was 49 years old. The coroner determined the cause of death was a fatal overdose of opiates. It was a dark and ambiguous end to a life filled with both creative success and immense turmoil. The man who played one of the most beloved and gentle characters of 90s television passed away under a cloud of suspicion and addiction. Pastorelli's death was a grim affair, complicated by legal troubles. The story of our next actress is equally tragic and complex, a case where the official cause of death left more questions than answers, sparking years of debate about what really happened to the bubbly star of Clueless. 9. Brittany Murphy. With her infectious laugh and big, expressive eyes, Brittany Murphy was a bubbly, energetic presence on screen. While she became a huge movie star with films like Clueless and 8 Mile, many fans first got to know her voice. For 13 seasons, she provided the voice for the ditzy but sweet Luann Platter on the beloved animated sitcom King of the Hill. She also starred in the short-lived sitcom Drexel's Class. Murphy had incredible comedic timing, but she was also a gifted dramatic actress. She had a unique, vibrant energy that made her a captivating performer and a Hollywood it girl in the early 2000s. In the years leading up to her death, however, her public image began to change. She appeared alarmingly thin, and her behavior in interviews sometimes seemed erratic, leading to widespread speculation about substance use and eating disorders, which she always denied. Her marriage to screenwriter Simon Monjack was also a source of controversy, with many of her friends expressing concern that he was a controlling and negative influence on her life. She was dropped from several film projects, and the once bright star seemed to be fading. On December 20, 2009, the world was stunned to learn that Brittany Murphy had passed away after collapsing in the bathroom of her Hollywood Hills home. She was only 32 years old. The official cause of death was ruled as pneumonia, with secondary factors of iron deficiency anemia and multiple medication intoxication. The coroner found a variety of over-the-counter and prescription medications in her system, none illegal, but the combination likely suppressed her body's ability to fight off the infection. In a bizarre and tragic twist, her husband, Simon Monjack, passed away just 5 months later in the same house from the exact same causes. Their deaths remain a source of mystery and speculation, a truly strange and heartbreaking Hollywood story. Murphy's case shows how even legal prescribed medications can become a deadly cocktail. The next actor on our list was one of the most respected talents of his generation, an Oscar winner whose death from a heroin overdose exposed the fact that addiction doesn't care about awards or critical acclaim. 10. Philip Seymour Hoffman. Calling Philip Seymour Hoffman just a sitcom actor would be a massive understatement. He was, without question, one of the greatest and most respected actors of his generation. An Oscar winner for Capote, he was known for his incredible versatility and his uncanny ability to disappear into complex, often troubled characters in films like The Master, Doubt, and Boogie Nights. He was a titan of the stage and screen. However, like many great actors, he also did television work, including a starring role in the Showtime comedy-drama series Happy-ish, which was in production when he died, and early guest appearances in shows like Law, Order in 1991. Hoffman was very open about his past struggles with addiction. He had gone to rehab for heroin and alcohol misuse as a young man, and had remained sober for 23 years. He was a dedicated family man with 3 young children and was at the absolute peak of his career. However, in 2013, he relapsed. He started with prescription painkillers and quickly spiraled back into using heroin. His friends and family were deeply concerned as they watched the brilliant actor descend back into the hell he thought he had escaped. On February 2, 2014, when he failed to pick up his children, a friend went to check on him at his New York City apartment. He was discovered to have passed away. He was 46 years old. The official cause of death was acute mixed substance intoxication. His apartment was reportedly littered with evidence of heavy substance use. The passing of Philip Seymour Hoffman was a devastating blow, not just to his loved ones, but to the entire film community. It was a brutal reminder that addiction is a lifelong disease and that no amount of success, talent, or willpower can guarantee a person is safe from it. Hoffman was a giant of the acting world whose rare TV comedy work was cut short. Our next story is about another brilliant young actor who got his start on a family TV show before becoming a movie icon, a teen heartthrob whose death outside a nightclub became a defining tragedy of the 1990s. 11. River Phoenix. River Phoenix was more than just a teen idol. He was the soulful, sensitive face of a new generation of actors in the late 80s and early 90s. With an Oscar nomination for running on empty and iconic roles in Stand By Me and My Own Private Idaho, he was hailed as one of the most promising talents of his time. Before he was a movie star, however, he got his start on television. His first major role was on the short-lived 1982 sitcom 7 Brides for 7 Brothers, where he played the youngest brother Guthrie. He had a natural, raw talent that was obvious even then. Phoenix was known for his dedication to environmental and animal rights causes and projected an image of clean living. He was a strict vegan and was publicly against substances. But privately, he had been using them for years. He struggled to cope with the pressures of being a reluctant superstar and the emotional baggage from an unconventional, often difficult childhood. His friends became increasingly worried about his use of cocaine and heroin, but he kept his addiction largely hidden from the public eye. The tragic end came on Halloween night in 1993. Phoenix was at the Viper Room, a nightclub on the Sunset Strip partially owned by Johnny Depp, with his girlfriend and his siblings, Rain and Joaquin. After a dispute inside, he went out to the sidewalk where he collapsed and began having violent seizures. His brother Joaquin made a frantic, heartbreaking 911 call, but it was too late. River Phoenix was pronounced to have passed away at a nearby hospital. He was just 23 years old. The coroner's report revealed he passed away from acute multiple substance intoxication from a lethal combination of different substances. His death was a cultural shockwave, marking a symbolic end to an era of innocence for Generation X and serving as a brutal public lesson on the hidden demons haunting Hollywood's brightest stars. Phoenix's death on a public sidewalk was a shocking spectacle. The next actor on our list, another child star with a promising career, met her end in a much more private but equally tragic way. Her story almost completely forgotten by the public. 12. Bridget Anderson. In 1982, a 7-year-old girl with bright eyes and an irresistible charm named Bridget Anderson became a star in the heartwarming family movie Savannah Smiles. She played Savannah, a little girl who runs away from her lonely life as a politician's daughter and is kidnapped by 2 bumbling, kind-hearted criminals. The movie was a modest hit, and Anderson was praised for her incredibly natural and adorable performance. She went on to appear in several TV shows, including guest spots on sitcoms like The Jeffersons and Remington Steele, and was seen as a child actor with immense potential. Like so many child stars, however, growing up in the spotlight was difficult. As a teenager, Anderson struggled to find roles and became, in her own words, a serious substance addict. She was reportedly more interested in partying and using substances than in pursuing her acting career. She became heavily involved with heroin and methamphetamines. Her family tried desperately to help her get clean, but she resisted their efforts. The adorable little girl from Savannah Smiles was lost in a world of addiction. In the late 1990s, she made a decision to finally get sober and was working at a health food store in Los Angeles while trying to get her life back on track. But in May 1997, she passed away from an overdose of alcohol and other substances. She was only 21 years old. Unlike the public passing of other stars, Anderson's death went largely unnoticed by the media she had once courted. It was a quiet, sad end for a young woman whose early promise was extinguished entirely by her addiction, a forgotten casualty of the pressures of childhood fame. Anderson's story is a quiet tragedy. The story of our next actor, a star of the popular show Taxi, was anything but quiet. His decades-long battle with addiction was painfully public, playing out in tabloids and on reality TV for the world to see. 13. Jeff Conaway. For millions of TV viewers in the late 70s and early 80s, Jeff Conaway was Bobby Wheeler, the handsome, struggling actor driving a cab for the Sunshine Cab Company in the classic sitcom Taxi. He was also famous for playing the slick T-Bird Kenickie in the blockbuster movie musical Grease. With his good looks and charisma, Conaway was a popular star with a promising career ahead of him. However, his life was plagued by severe chronic pain stemming from a back injury he sustained while filming Grease. To manage the pain, he was prescribed powerful painkillers, which started a lifelong and devastating addiction to opioids. This addiction was compounded by a heavy use of cocaine and alcohol. His substance misuse problems led to him being fired from Taxi. For the next several decades, his life became a chaotic cycle of addiction, brief periods of sobriety, and health crises. His struggles became painfully public in the 2000s when he appeared on the reality show Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew. Viewers watched as a frail and deeply unwell Conaway appeared on screen, often incoherent and wheelchair-bound, showcasing the horrific long-term effects of his substance misuse. He spoke openly about his addictions and his many failed attempts to get clean. It was a shocking and sad spectacle, a stark contrast to the vibrant young star he had once been. On May 11, 2011, Conaway was found unconscious and was placed in a medically induced coma. He passed away on May 27 at the age of 60. His death was attributed to pneumonia with sepsis, a condition brought on by his body being completely ravaged by years of prescription medication misuse.